Rotarians and guests, welcome to the October 14th meeting of the Rotary Club of York. We are the 24th largest Rotary Club in the world. Leading us today in our opening song and pledge is past District Governor Dick Brown, and providing our invocation is Dave Hogue. Dick.
Thank you. Well, just a moment, please. Little bit, this is not a technical problem. This is a technical operator problem.
We've all had those, Dick.
We're still having it. Sorry. Here we go. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of gray, for purple mountain majesty above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's give thanks. O God, our Creator and Redeemer, bless this nation, we pray, as our politics have become contentious. We fear for the future of this nation that you so richly blessed with liberty, freedom, the ability to pursue happiness and justice for all, as we strive ever closer to these founding ideals, never finding the perfection that you envision, but striving nonetheless. Bless our nation as we endure this tumultuous election season. We pray for wisdom and for peace. We attempt to divine what only you can see, the outcome of this election, and we pray that today's discussion will inform and motivate us. We pray for protection in the COVID pandemic for each of us and for those we love. Thank you for blessing Rotary International and our club, that we may prosper to do your will throughout our community and throughout the world, even more in the future. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Brother Brown and Brother Hogue, for an uplifting opening of today's meeting. And for members who frequently tune into our weekly meetings, you'll notice that Dr. Terry Madonna is on the screen with me, and we had a meeting on Monday and a meeting earlier today. Dr. Madonna, as you can imagine, it is Christmas in October for him, based upon his expertise and the fact that Pennsylvania is a battleground state. Dr. Madonna is on multiple virtual meetings every day, reporter interviews. He's very, very busy. So we thought it would be best for all to leave him up on the screen. So that's why you get the treat of seeing him during the announcements. Thanks, Dr. Madonna. So the investment committee will meet today at 1 p.m. via Zoom. Youth Exchange meets tomorrow at noon via Zoom. And our club's DEI committee, newly formed, held their inaugural meeting this past Monday and will meet again this coming Monday, October 19th at 8 a.m. via Zoom. Always your program suggestions are welcome to past president and program committee chair Mike Summers. His email is on the screen. We shared with this information with you last week, but Rotary Leadership Institute is coming up. There's an opportunity to register to attend the virtual seminar, which will be on October 24th. RLI is a leadership and development program to strengthen Rotary clubs through education, collaboration, and the exchange of ideas among its future leaders. It's an opportunity for our club members to connect with other Rotarians and exchange ideas as well, share experiences and learn new skills to bring back to our club. If you want to learn more about this wonderful organization that we call Rotary and how to further advance our mission to create lasting change, then RLI is for you. Please contact Bert by this Friday. Service Above Self award nominations to the other Summers, President-elect Jackie Summers, and her emails on the screen for you as well. Just note on your calendar, on November 5th, our district Rotary Foundation dinner will be held virtually. There will be a keynote speaker and awards presentation. Rotarians are asked to make a donation to the foundation in lieu of a registration fee, and you'll find more information about this district event via the newsletter and the website of the district. I did want to let you know that at our Rotary Club of York board meeting last Thursday, our board unanimously voted to return to in-person meetings. And those will be held in a hybrid format, so those that need to or prefer to join virtually will also be able to do that, thanks in large part to some equipment that we invested in and to Ben, our virtual meeting guru. So those meetings will have a cap of attendees. Those will be 54 individuals to meet in person. So we're asking that to reserve a seat for luncheon meetings at the country club will be communicated solely in the announcer. You'll find that information. Members must log into our website. So if you don't know your username and password for the website, look into it before tomorrow, as reservations go live when the announcer goes out tomorrow. Okay, we have some really good news to share as a result of our Love for Community fundraiser event. Raised almost $42,000. Woohoo! Congratulations. Thank you to everyone who was involved with the event production, participation, and support. As a result of your passion, participation, and hard work, our club will provide much needed support to 4 worthy projects in our community: York City Little League, the Kiwanis Lake Restoration Project, the William Penn Bearcat Interact Club, and Child Care Consultants Child Care Scholarship Fund. So thank you once again for in a difficult year, pivoting as we all did with this event, for making it very successful. And on to our poll. As I said, we will be returning to in-person lunch meetings. And we have over 100 folks joining us today for our meeting and to hear Dr. Madonna. So it's a great opportunity for you to share your preference, and which will allow us to provide an indication to the Country Club of York. So Ben, if you would like to share the poll, please.
Thank you, Ann, President Ann. The question for the poll this week is, are you planning to return in person to the Country Club of York for lunch meetings? There are 2 options that you can respond to, and of course we know that we understand we have a lot of people on today, more than 100, and it is important for us to gather this information. It's super helpful to us. But you can either answer, I plan to regularly or occasionally attend in person at the country club, or I will continue attending virtually for the foreseeable future. So we're going to leave this up for about 10 more seconds. It looks like 70% of you have voted so far. Should be coming in right now, and they're coming in pretty nicely right now. Looks like 75% of you have voted. Gonna wait about 10 more seconds here. And like we said, this is very helpful for us to plan ahead for the future and to understand where everybody stands in terms of meeting in person or meeting virtually. So I'm gonna give it 5 more seconds. It looks like we have 85% of you that have voted. And we're gonna do 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And with about 86% of the votes in, looks like the majority of you have said that you plan to regularly or occasionally attend in person. So thank you all for voting, and we will use this information to help plan for future events as well.
Fantastic, Ben. Thank you very much to everyone who was able to vote. We have 117 attendees on the line tuning in for our meeting today. So it looks like if most of them are able to attend next week, we will hit our cap at the country club. So please check the announcer to be able to register for next week. And to allow extra time for Dr. Madonna today, we will forego our biz spotlight, but it will be back with us next week. And before I invite past President Mike Summers to the virtual podium to introduce today's speaker, who's been a frequent guest to our club, I welcome Rotarians to submit your questions at any time via the GoToMeeting format question option on the right of your screen for Dr. Madonna. Past President Mike.
Wow, it has been a crazy and unpredictable year. We started 2020 with a robust worldwide economy and record low unemployment here in the United States. And then we watched as China locked down a large city due to an outbreak of a previously unknown virus for over a month. Then, just like the movies, we saw COVID-19 spread around the world. We had our own lockdown in the US with scary outlooks in New York City, and locally, Governor Wolf created a shelter-in-place directive. The stock market tanked, unemployment hit 14%, masks became the norm, and we all now know how to Zoom. Racial injustice, Black Lives Matter, ongoing protests, rioting have defined 2020 as well. More recently, the stock markets seem to be back, sports are being played again, unemployment has dropped to now stand at 7.9%, and the economy tries to reopen. And in the next 3 weeks, we may know who the next president will be for the next 4 years, and perhaps even have a new Supreme Court justice. 2020 has been crazy. It has been unpredictable. So who could help us better understand the political environment to all of this and give us a peek towards the elections on November 3rd? Well, it would be our good friend, Dr. G. Terry Madonna. At Franklin and Marshall College, Dr. Madonna is director of the Center for Politics and Public Affairs. He's also professor of public affairs and also director of the Franklin and Marshall College poll. For more than 30 years, Terry has taught and written about his two academic specialties, the American presidency and American political parties and political behavior. As a pollster in recent years, he has written extensively about voters and voting behaviors. Fellow Rotarians and guests, please give a warm virtual welcome to Dr. Terry Madonna. Terry?
Hey, thank you. I was going to take a drink. I think I will. It's iced tea, so don't get the wrong idea. Well, I'm delighted to be here, I think. No, I am delighted to be here. The problem is we are living in, as one of the folks earlier said, used the word contentious. That may be an understatement for this election. So let me try to assess it more broadly, and then let's talk about Pennsylvania. And there's a number of other topics we can get into, the controversy over mail-in balloting and where that's likely to go. And do we have a resolution of the election on November 3rd or even a couple of days after, or does it take weeks, perhaps months, until we get a final determination of the presidential election? So let's start with, let's go back and let me say a few words about 2016. Number one, as everybody knows, President Trump lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton by 1.1 percentage points. Trump won the Electoral College, getting 306 electors as a result of the elections in 50 states and the District of Columbia, and ultimately, obviously, the presidency of the United States, 306 electors. And so if we go back and look at that election, the big question is, why did Donald Trump win? Why did he win? Well, the fact of the matter is that the Trump campaign laid out a strategy to win a certain demographic of voters in our country that, for the most part, were Democrats, but these voters, Democratic voters in regions of our state, and particularly in Wisconsin and Michigan, two other important battleground states, the Democratic voters believed that the Democratic Party had walked away from them in their agenda, and President Trump's campaign developed what they called, and we all now refer to as, the Rust Belt strategy. Many of these voters lived in places where mining and milling and the great industrial revolution once was centered in our country. I'm talking about coal, steel, iron. You get the point. Now, some of those those industries have been in serious decline. And though many of those voters are registered Democrats, those Democratic voters, white working class voters, high school educations or less, registered Democrats believed that the party had walked away from them and their agenda as the party became more urban and suburban oriented, where the philosophy and the ideological predilections of the voters in the cities and the suburbs are very different from small town and rural America, obviously small town and rural Pennsylvania. And I'm referencing now the old industrial parts of our state out in the Southwest and particularly also up in the Northeast. So basically what happened, Trump developed the Rust Belt strategy, which meant bring back coal, bring back iron, get rid of the, if you will, get rid of the bad trade deals that had been negotiated by presidents earlier, NAFTA and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And he campaigned in those regions extensively. Hillary Clinton did the opposite. She spent virtually all of her time in the cities and suburbs and literally neglected the working class voters of our state and some of these other battleground states as well. Well, let's now move forward. I may come back to some of this in a moment, but let's start with one fundamental fact. We're following the elections all over the place, but there are 6 battleground states that are getting probably the lion's share of the attention: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Florida, Arizona, and North Carolina. President Trump, then candidate Trump, won all 6 of them back in 2016. As I speak to you now, President Trump is losing all 6 of them. He's losing all 6 of them to Joe Biden. In my humble judgment, it's virtually impossible for the president to win a second term if he loses even 2 of the bigger ones. I'll say, how about Pennsylvania and Michigan? How about Pennsylvania and Florida? Pennsylvania has 20 electoral votes. Florida has 29. 2 states, 49 electoral votes. So, and candidly, I don't know a way that the president can win re-election if, in fact, he doesn't win at least 5 of the 6. I think if he loses 2 or more, particularly if we're talking about the big ones, I don't know how he gets to 270 electoral votes. As I speak to you now, I looked last evening, I was busy and didn't, oh, by the way, if you have no life like I do and you wake up every morning, what do I do? Well, I get on Real Clear Politics. I get on Larry Sabato's Crystal Ball. He's a professor at the University of Virginia. And I get on Nate Silver's 538 blog to find out what the hell's going on in the election nationally, as well as in our state, and what issues matter. They're great sources, by the way. So I check on that first thing in the morning. Well, this morning I didn't have time. I didn't do it. But at any rate, here's the point. Of all 6 battleground states, on the average of the polls on Real Clear Politics, President Trump trails Joe Biden by 7 percentage points. 7 percentage points. If we go back a month earlier and looked at our state, it was 4 percentage points. So there has been an uptick in the support for Joe Biden in Pennsylvania and in many of the other, and then in 5 other battleground states. And as I indicated before, Joe Biden leads in every one of them. Now the lead in North Carolina is about 1.4 percentage points. The lead in Arizona is 2.7 percentage points. Florida 3.7. So they're not huge. But if you take Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, Biden's lead is 5 points or higher. And as I indicated, 7 points in our state. Nationally, Joe Biden has a 10 percentage point lead nationally. That's the largest lead that he has had so far. I'm talking about the average of the polls that are respected, that the sites like Nate Silver or Real Clear Politics would put up on their site and analyze. So let's go into a couple of other aspects of this. Let's take a look at the president's job performance nationally. If we look at President Trump's job performance, it's about 44-45% positive. That's not bad. It's been down in the 40% range, and 40%, 39-40% throughout the past 5 or 6 months. And the job performance is relevant in this respect. No incumbent president has won re-election with a job performance below 48-50% positive. In fact, we've had two presidents whose job performance was in the 30 percentile range, 34, 35, 37% positive on election day, and both lost re-election. I'm talking about Jimmy Carter, who lost to Ronald Reagan and George Herbert in 1980, and George Herbert Walker Bush, who lost to Bill Clinton in I'll get this right, in 1992. And the reason those presidents lost was, in the main, it was about the economy. We had what we called stagflation back in Jimmy Carter's term, double-digit unemployment, double-digit inflation. Now, when Carter lost, we also had the Iranian hostage crisis, where young folks, students, took over the American embassy and held the staff hostage. In 1992, we were in a serious recession. Remember James Carville? He's still around. He's still on some of the cable channels, who ran Bill Clinton's campaign. And he came up with one of the most famous utterances. It's the economy, stupid. I'll leave that alone for the moment. And then when you get to 2008, Barack Obama won the presidency because of what? Because of what we now refer to, and even then referred to, as the Great Recession. So President Trump's most serious problem begins with coronavirus. I'll come back to the economy. Coronavirus. In a poll that we did in September, we released it in late September, 25% of Pennsylvania voters said that COVID-19 was the most serious problem confronting the state. Everything else dropped sharply off of that as COVID-19 dominates many aspects of the election. And the same is true, by the way, in the other states as well, national polls. The fact of the matter is that that's Trump's and has been his most serious problem. And by the way, on job performance, I hope you're seated for this. I was literally almost fell off my chair when a month ago a Gallup poll came out, and it had Republicans giving President Trump a positive job performance in the 90% range. 90%. Democrats giving him a positive job performance at 2%. Since we've had scientific polling, we've never had that kind of a divide, that kind of a division. It's humongous, as they say. And that illustrates something that's very important: the deeply ingrained polarization and partisanship that exists in our country right now. I put it another way: if Donald Trump does something bad, Democrats criticize, Republicans cheer. If Donald Trump does something good, Democrats criticize and Republicans cheer. I don't remember, not since we've had scientific polling have we had the deep divisions that the American people have by party on almost every issue we could talk about. I don't care if we're talking about foreign policy. I don't care if we're talking about domestic policy. I don't care if we're talking about attitudes towards racial justice, if we're talking about gender issues or class issues. It is unbelievable how deeply polarized we are. And here's what the polarization has done. Past presidents have had job performances, by the way, that have been, up into the 50s, and then maybe drop 15, 20 points, up 10, 15 points. Imagine this, President Trump's positive job performance has ranged from 40 to 46%. Look at that narrow range. And the answer is simple, the polarization. It's so deeply ingrained that there's nowhere for the president to go higher. How does he go higher? Because Democrats in the main, no way, no how on a positive job performance. And the same, so we're only talking about a 40 to 46% range, and it's deeply driven by sharp partisanship. And so what we had for the longest time was kind of a static situation when it came to the polls. They did not vary that much. Now, in the last couple of weeks, Joe Biden has opened up a larger lead in many of the battleground states, particularly like Pennsylvania, where, as I said, he has a 7-point lead. It was 4 points a month or so ago, a lead in our state. And the fact of the matter is that the COVID-19 has brought about a recession, and there's a big debate going on about, what's the future of COVID-19 in our country until we get a vaccine. As you probably also know, there's been a spike up. The last time I read 2 days ago, it looked like 20 states have had a spike up, including the state of Pennsylvania. And so that's pretty significant as well. All right, let's move on. Okay, COVID-19, President Trump's job performance is 42% positive. 42% problem when handling COVID-19. If we go back to March and April and May, it was 50%. So there's been a sharp decline. And as we've had that sharp decline, that's put the race into almost a static position, with Biden having a lead in most of the battleground states, now in all of the battleground states, as we've had an uptick in recent weeks. All right, if COVID-19 is President Trump's most serious problem, what is his greatest strength? It's the economy, stupid. And when we look at who can best handle, and I don't care what problems you want to look at, I looked at COVID-19, we could look at honesty, we could look at character, we could look at handling foreign policy, we could handle a whole bunch of domestic issues. Make no mistake about it, Donald Trump trails Joe Biden when we ask who can best handle the problems that I just mentioned. There's one big exception, it's the economy. It's the economy. Right now, on handling the economy, who can best handle the economy? President Trump, 51% positive, 51% positive, and he defeats Joe Biden on that score, and included in that are creating jobs. So the fact of the matter is that President Trump's greatest strength throughout COVID-19, so let's say end of February, beginning of March, up through October, into October, what we know for sure is that President Trump has been arguing that we have come out of the recession brought on by COVID-19 pretty strongly. He talks about job creation. He talks about the increase in gross domestic product, the fall off, and there's still millions of people collecting unemployment insurance. In fact, the last time we got the report on unemployment, it was 8.5% positive, and it was way up into the teens during the height of the COVID-19 and the recession in our country. So looking forward, what do we know about this? What do we know about this? Well, here's what we know. The economy has more often than not been the most essential element in presidential campaigns. going back to the beginning of the Republic. And since Donald Trump is ahead on that score, why do you think he constantly talks about the economy? Remember what he said before COVID-19? We've had the best economy in the history of the country. I'm going to let the economic historians go back through history. But what did he talk about? Gross domestic product, number of Americans working, record number of Americans working, lowest unemployment for people of color, Latinos, and Asian Americans in the history of our country. And so that's one of the reasons why President Trump continues to bring up and emphasizes the economy in almost every speech and almost every outing, press conference that he talks about, arguing that in the third quarter of this year, we will see big improvement in the economy, and next year we will go back to having a record economy. And so what ultimately, how that plays out in the next couple of weeks until we vote on November 3rd, I can't really say that because far more people, it looks like 75% of Americans are eligible to do mail-in balloting, and we have people actually voting in person earlier this week in Georgia, and mail-in balloting will I think dominate the debate and the discussion, not just until November 3rd, but perhaps weeks thereafter as we go through the process of counting them. And so the bigger point I'm trying to make here is simple. As we have moved over the last couple of weeks, and we've seen this spike up, not huge, but this spike up in the polling numbers for Joe Biden in the battleground states and nationally. Essentially what's going on is that in the last couple of weeks, we've had big events that have taken place. Whether you're a Trump supporter or not, Biden supporter, it's not my concern. Obviously you're entitled to have your own views. Welcome to them. But no one can argue that Donald Trump had a first great debate. You just can't argue that was the case. And I'm not going to review that debate. I did that ad nauseum after it took place. So look what's happened. We've had not the best debate, the uptick in COVID-19, the death of Justice Ginsburg, and the appointment of Judge Barrett. By the way, I've listened to a good bit of that, and you can't argue that Judge Barrett, members of Congress are going to vote on a very partisan fashion for lots of reasons that they have, but I thought she has done an outstanding job in her testimony. Again, I'm not indicating that that's a reason to put her on the court or not. I'm just talking about how she has responded, particularly to the Democrats who brought up a lot of important issues. Roe v. Wade, guns, should she participate in court appeals that deal with the voting because of her appointment by President Trump? All right, moving on. And then we have something else, and that is the president coming down with COVID-19. Now he's back on the campaign trail. His physicians have said that he's tested negative for it. And as everybody knows, they're virtually living in our state. So that has presented some very serious problems for the president. Now, let me conclude this part of what I want to say by talking about our state. Pennsylvania is not just one of the battleground states, but it is what a bunch of experts have called, and you could go to Nate Silver's 538 blog, and they have said that Pennsylvania, the blog and the writers on the blog have said that Pennsylvania is the tipping point state. What's that mean? That means if you win the state of Pennsylvania, you're going to get the 270 electoral votes. If you win PA, you get the 270, and hence the presidency of the United States. The fact of the matter is we are the most visited states by the candidates and their surrogates. You can't, every day when you open up your paper or watch TV or radio, listen to radio, what do you know? Oh, one of the candidates or their surrogates are here. Biden earlier in the week was in Erie. President Trump was in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Biden's doing an event in Philadelphia. The fact that Joe Biden was out in the Philly suburbs. I mean, I've joked and said they're spending so much time in the state, we ought to give them a residency. A reporter told me a couple of weeks ago that he had counted 40 visits by candidates and their surrogates, and that was a month or so ago. You can imagine what that will amount to. But we are by far the most visited state in the union, and that's not likely to change since we are the tipping point, and we only have a couple of weeks to go until we actually vote. All right, let me go to one other subject, and then let's do whatever questions you might have. I presume there'll be a fair number. Okay, I want to talk about mail-in ballots. In the June 2nd primary of this year, June 2nd, in the Pennsylvania primary, 1.5 million Pennsylvanians cast ballot by mail or absentee. That was almost 50% of the total, 50% of the total. And by the way, it took 2 full weeks to have all the elections certified by our Department of State, all 2 weeks until they were all certified. And now we are going to have double the number, at least double the number of people who voted by mail and absentee cast votes for the November 3rd election. You got that? 3 million. We have 9 million, about 9 million, close to 9 million registered voters in the state. But what do we know about these mail-in ballots? First of all, far more Democrats are going to use mail-in than Republicans. More Republicans are going to vote in person. Remember, President Trump has constantly referred to mail-in balloting as fraud, 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 fraud. And there's been all kinds of debates within various states, and ours included, about how these votes will be counted and aspects of the mail-in balloting that could go awry. And there are a fair number of Pennsylvanians who have concern about mail-in balloting, and I'm going to talk about how this is all supposed to work in a moment. And so we are going to have, and this, by the way, is the first time in the history of the state, that we have allowed mail-in voting. We have had absentees historically. You have to have a reason in the Pennsylvania election code to use absentee. You're ill, you're traveling. Mail-in voting for the first time this year for any reason at all. All right, so let's now talk a little bit about how mail-in balloting will work in our state. There have been some legislative action and some court action relative to mail-in balloting. A week or so ago, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said that Pennsylvania election officials have 3 days after November 3rd, that means Friday of election week, to get all of the ballots counted, provided the mail-in ballots were postmarked by November 3rd. Now, and we're going to see how that works out. There are some analysts who say, given the flood, it could take not days, but weeks again until, if we have close elections in the battleground states, 75% of Americans are eligible to vote by mail, and something like 34, 35 states actually allow, or actually now provide mail-in voting. There are a couple of states that's the only way they vote is by mail. Now, point number 2, and this is a terminology I've never heard before, naked ballots. What's that mean? Well, if you apply for a mail-in ballot, you're going to get the mail, it's going to come to you, and there's going to be 2 envelopes, 2. An inside envelope, a smaller envelope, in which you will put your ballot, your vote. An outer envelope, which is self-addressed to county election officials. You got it? 2 envelopes. If you do not put your ballot in the smaller inter envelope and then put the envelope in the larger envelope, it won't be counted. Hear what I just said? If you indeed just put the ballot in you put your naked ballot in the larger envelope with the mailing address on, it won't be counted. And that's gotten into a fairly big controversy because people expect that, election officials are concerned about the naked envelope, if you will, not in the inner ballot. There's also been a debate, if you will, about the satellites. That means election offices that county officials has opened, as well as the so-called drop boxes where you can take your vote and put it in a drop box, meaning not putting it into the mail. And so there's a whole series of aspects of this that have been controversial, in the courts, not just in our state, but in federal courts as well. And we're going to have to see how that all plays out. The other aspect of this, when we get the vote, is the role of what we call poll watchers and how that's all going to work out. Candidates can have poll watchers, political parties can have poll watchers. There are rules and regulations that apply to them, and we're going to see how that all works out. And then the distance that you have to stay removed from the actual polling place, where you can have people handing out voting literature, and there is some concern that, given the contentious nature of this election, that could lead to what do I want to say? That could lead to I almost don't want to say violence, but contentiousness. And given how deeply divided we are, how polarized we are, and how bitter this election has become, we're just not quite sure where all of that goes. But the bottom line here is that we are in perhaps one of the most unusual elections in American history. And I've taught presidential history for a good bit of my academic career, and I just don't know anything quite like what we're going through now. And obviously, we're going to have to see how it plays out. The second point related to this is the nature of the Trump presidency. I'm a neutral on this, and I have to be, and I try to stick to the facts. Now, you obviously have to interpret the facts, but there's one element that is decidedly unique, not totally, maybe unique isn't the word, but different, and that is Trump's personality and style. There isn't any doubt that we've never had a president, the 44 other presidents, not like President Trump in personality and style. And, his supporters, the working class voters that put him into office in our state and in these other battleground states, actually like that style and like that personality, because he's taken his finger and he's sticking it into the eye of the establishment. And remember, Trump in 2016 was the anti-establishment candidate by far. And he actually continues to, use a lot of rhetoric that, people find surprising. But given his personality and given what we knew during the course of the 2016 campaign, I don't know why any of us expected he might change. I actually thought he might change. That's how wrong I was. And so the style and personality, with Twitter and the other forms of social media, gets broadcast very widely. And we saw that, by the way, during the first debate, some of that personality with the interruptions. The fact of the matter is that Biden interrupted as well, but he wasn't as frequent in that, and it didn't appear as dominant as Trump's did. And so, with a couple of weeks to go, here we are in a situation where where right now Joe Biden is the favorite to win. But remember when I talked about the models that had Biden likely to win the presidency? You find them on, for example, Nate Silver's blog. Almost all the analysts will not rule out that Donald J. Trump could somehow get to 270 electoral votes. They won't rule it out. but still lose the popular vote as he did 4 years ago. And they're not predicting this. They're just saying you can't rule it out. But right now, he has a heavy slog ahead of him, given this spike up in the battleground states that we've seen by Joe Biden, with him leading in all 6. So why don't I stop here? I'm looking at 12:45, and we'll take whatever questions you have. Or I'll
Thank
go
you.
home. Oh, I can't say I'm going home. I'm home.
Thank you, Dr. Madonna. You certainly are a wealth of knowledge on the local and international level. We have a ton of questions for you, and contentious seems to be the word for us, not just nationally, but locally as well. So the saying is all politics are local. So we have a question here. What are your thoughts? Please analyze and predict the congressional race, Congressman Perry and Eugene
Yeah.
DePasquale.
Well, I'll tell you, that, by the way, is one of the top 20 elections in the country by a number of analysts. It is, looked at nationally by all sorts of observers and party folks, and obviously the people who are running congressional campaigns. And it right now, it looks like it's going to be close. And that also has been pretty contentious. As we know, Congressman Perry is a devoted supporter of President Trump, and of all the members of Congress, even on the Republican side, he has one of the higher percentages of supporting Trump in terms of the issues that have come before the House. And it's going to be close. The district was reoriented, that's one way of putting it, reorganized by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court in 2000, I think it was February of 2018. And so they took Southern York out of it, which is pretty heavily Republican. York City is in it, Northern York, northern half of York, Dauphin County, and parts of Cumberland. And so the problem that it has created for Republicans that dominated that district is York City. Everybody knows the politics there. Harrisburg, you know the politics there. And the fact of the matter is that Dauphin County in South Central Pennsylvania has gone Democratic, not just because of Harrisburg, but because of the suburbs around Harrisburg. The suburbs outside of Harrisburg. And by the way, when the Democrats won 41 seats they won 41 congressional elections. That's why we have, what's her name? Oh, Nancy Pelosi. How could I forget her as speaker? Is because of what they were able to do in the suburbs around our state and our country. The Democrats won 3 of the 4 congressional races down in the Philadelphia suburbs in Montgomery, Delaware, and Chester counties, the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th CDs. They also won a district up in the Lehigh Valley, the 7th congressional district. So we go, now the Republicans did maintain their hold on the 1st congressional district, which is essentially Bucks County. So going back to the 10th, the district now has more of a, there are more Democrats in it, let me put it that way, or Democratic voters in it than the 10th did before. And make no mistake about it, the commercials are flooding the airwaves around here in South Central Pennsylvania. We see them obviously over here in Lancaster County where I live as well. And I'm not going to make a prediction. Right now, it looks like it's going to be close, but what we don't know is there a wave going on? South Central Pennsylvania, and I'll put it this way, let's think of a capital T, up through the heartland of their state, fanning across Route 80, or if you will, the New York border, conservative, Republican over the course of recent history. In fact, more than recent history, with the exception of Dauphin County, as I indicated before, that's now Democratic. And what's that name up in Penn State? Oh, Center County. It was that different spelling, CENTRE, also went for Hillary, as did Dauphin County. And so I think it's going to be right now it looks like a very close election. That was too long an answer. I'm going to be brief, or we'll be here to 4 o'clock.
Okay, Dr. Madonna, I'm going to try to attempt to combine 3 different questions for you. You mentioned previously that they're very similar. So the Rotarians, you'll see bits and pieces of your question here. You mentioned previously that nationally Biden has a 10-point lead in the average of the polls. And the question is, didn't the polls indicate that President Trump would lose those key states a few weeks prior to the 2016 election? Should we have more credence in the polls this year? And the final combination of these 3, to what degree are you concerned about the Bradley effect in polling this year, where people don't tell the truth to you and your colleagues?
Yeah. All right. Well, let's start out nationally. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 1.1, 1.2 percentage points, pretty close popular vote. Having said that, however, the national polls had her winning by 3 on the average. So that's, margin of error stuff. That was, he did win. She did win nationally, and the polls showed that. Many of the battleground states, and including Franklin and Marshall for the first time, in many of the key states, the polls did not reflect what the actual vote was in these states. And state polls have all gone through big evaluations of their methodology, of their sampling techniques to try to modify. One of the factors that happened was that we do these statistical adjustments called weighting to make sure that if, polling shows we don't have, the interviews, too few women, too few, whatever the demographic might be that's missing, polls get weighted. And many of the state polls did not statistically adjust for education. And what did I just say? I said that Trump's victory came from white working class voters with high school educations or less, particularly in our state, out in the Southwest and up in the northeastern part of our state. So there's been a big reevaluation of the polls and how they're conducted. Now, here's something else. One of the differences, Trump is now an incumbent. He has a record. You follow me? It's not like he was a challenger. It's not like he was anti-establishment, which he was. And so I think, given the adjustments that have been made by many pollsters, I don't think we're going to have the same problem. Now, to go to the so-called Bradley effect, this isn't science. And there have been some studies that are going to disagree with what I'm going to say. But I've talked to some of my colleagues who do what I do, a lot of political analysis. And I do believe that there were individuals in 2016 who would not tell pollsters they were going to vote for Trump. I love the term for that, shy voters. Shy voters. And I do think there was a good bit of that. The other thing is that, and I don't think that will be the case given Trump's record now. He has a record given the fact that his supporters are much more outgoing and much more expressive in their support for him. But obviously, we're going to have to wait and see. Something else happened within 10 days before we voted in 2016, 10 days out. If you weren't polling, you wouldn't have picked up what happened within the 10 days before the actual election day. Well, what happened? Well, a huge percentage of voters made up their mind or changed their mind in the last 10 days. And the majority of them went for Trump. Majority of them went for Trump. So if you're not polling, you couldn't pick it up. There's something else. Remember that guy named Comey? Former FBI director. You know what he did? I think it was Thursday or Friday before the election in November of 2016. He said, I'm opening up an investigation into Hillary Clinton's email. Remember Russia? Remember the dossier and all of that stuff? So again, some of it depends on when you were in the field, and we weren't, and so we wouldn't have picked that up. Other pollsters who were had better results. But I do think there's been a major reflection and major analysis of many of the responsible and respected state polls to determine what happened.
Thank you, Dr. Madonna. Now, this is one that reflects upon the contentious times that you mentioned. And a Rotarian says, I've actively participated in 5 presidential elections, and I've never seen such a divide amongst the people and their political stance. How do we move on from here as a society? And is the answer different dependent upon which candidate wins the election for president?
Yeah. Well, that's a wonderful question. And if I had an answer for this, I'd be rich. Well, you watch cable and, like I do, I flip around, I try to get both points, all the points of view. So I understand what the points of view are of the candidates and of, party officials and the voters, which are often interviewed. I don't have a short answer. I don't have a complete or exhaustive answer. The only way is if we come together and use the C word. It's called compromise. And so relatively moving forward, I think if Trump were to win re-election, remember, he would be in a final term. So that might mean that he could reach out more and try to reach a compromise and try to work out a deal. But look at the efforts on the stimulus package, another stimulus package where the Republicans and the Democrats in Congress are in, it's a Venus and Mars thing, and where President Trump, has his proposal, Pelosi and the Democrats have theirs, and never the twain shall meet. I'm at a loss to figure out how we could possibly end the bitter polarization. Sometimes, what it takes? A crisis. God forbid, a crisis that, would involve the lives of Americans that might help us pull together. And that's not uncommon in the past to have a crisis in which we were unified. I'm not even convinced that a crisis would unify. I've never seen anything like this. Here's something else that goes on. If you're a Democrat, you're going to watch CNN, you're going to watch MSNBC, forget Fox. If you're a Republican, you're not going to watch CNN, you're not going to watch MSNBC, and you're not going to listen to NPR. If you're a Republican, you're going to go and find local, radio stations that have a conservative point of view. So here's my point. If the voters aren't listening, aren't paying any, attention in the sense that you try to get the other view, not as expressed by people of your view and in your party, how can you figure out a way to make it all work together? And the partisanship is so great that's coming out in the campaigns. I mean, one of the concerns that the Republicans have expressed about Joe Biden is that even though he has a history of being moderate, that if the Senate turns Democratic, and by the way, there's a good possibility that could take place, and Biden wins the presidency, the Democrats will own Congress and own the presidency. You know what I mean when I say that. Mm-hmm. What does that translate in? What happens if the Democrats put a big time progressive agenda on the table and send it to Biden? What does he do? Well, you know what Republicans will say? He's really hiding his progressive views. A couple of weeks ago, when he was out in Allegheny County, Joe Biden trying to appeal to the working class voters that put Donald Trump into the presidency said, I support fracking. I will not ban fracking. In other words, Biden is doing something that Hillary didn't do, which is going after Trump's support base among working class voters. And one of the reasons that Trump trails, and I mentioned this before, is he's not doing as well as he did in 2016 among working class voters. He's also being hammered in the suburbs, not just in Philadelphia, but in other smaller third-class cities as well. And so, there's no easy answer to that. I think I provided an answer. Answer is no answer. I'm only kidding.
You did, Dr. Madonna, and just suffice it to say that there were many more questions. Our club really appreciates your visits than we had time for you to answer today. And I'm sure
My
you'll go
pleasure.
on and leave us and answer more questions, but we're glad you're not shy like those shy voters, and you shared your expertise and perspective with us. We know you have a life despite your early morning routine to scour sources, because we did that picture of your handsome grandson in the background.
Yeah,
And
there he goes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh,
My wife is wonderful too. Uh, she works for me. She doesn't get any salary, but she works for me, scheduling events and all of that. Yeah, yeah, you know. I'll
keep it
tell
at
you what, it's a time when we're all kind of back in, you know, the family and the roots in our family. We're thinking a lot more about that perhaps than we do. We
Well,
did.
these contentious times certainly are a mixed blessing, and this may touch your heart as in honor of you joining us today. We will ask you to sign a book plate in a book that we will donate, and that book is called Playday School Day. It will be presented to our very own Crispus Attucks Early Learning and Child Care Center Library here in the city of York. So, Dr. Madonna, we wish you safe travels and sleep-filled
Okay.
and keep hanging in there up until and probably past the election. Thanks for
Oh,
joining
yeah.
us
Hey,
today.
thanks for having me. I'm signing off.
All right, Rotarians and guests, please join us next week. Our speaker will be Joe Arthur, the Executive Director of the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank, who will talk about the work of the food bank and how they're coping with the significant increased needs during the pandemic. And remember that 54 members maximum will be able to attend in person for the luncheon next week at the Country Club with reservations required. Please check the announcer for details. And I have a closing song treat for you today. In light of the looming election and as a battleground state, we've been barraged with commercials and messages. Today's song is one of my favorites by the Brothers Osborne, and it is called Shoot Me Straight. Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful week. Thank you so much.